Welcome to the Something About Sandy Film Fight Podcast with your host, Ash Baker.
Oh hi, it's you again. I'm so glad you can join me for another episode of the Something About Sandy Film Fight Podcast, the podcast that takes the best and worst films on a given theme and selects characters for them to fight it out on Street Fighter. Hadouken! I'm your host, Ash Baker, and well, let's press up, down, left, right, A start to get going on this week's episode. This week's theme is
Console Wars.
The console wars were huge in the late 80s and early 90s, with Sega and Nintendo going head to head to see who would come out on top. Both had their lovable mascots to lead the way, with Nintendo's Italian plumber Mario being pitted against Sega's brash blue hedgehog Sonic. Both companies traded blows and had several victories and losses, but in the end neither of them had a decisive victory. After Sony entered the fray with the PlayStation in the mid-90s and Microsoft's Xbox not that far behind, Nintendo and Sega have since faded into the background, with Nintendo concentrating on innovative and family-friendly consoles and Sega out of the console business completely. Despite these two players being overtaken, their work laid the foundation for gaming as we know it today. Obviously this is a films podcast, so we'll be taking a look at this console war through the two films associated with them, which are Super Mario Bros. From the early 90s and Sonic the Hedgehog from last year. It was with a sense of intrigue and trepidation that I started this week's podcast. I'm a big fan of the games, and as a kid my brothers and I regularly had both Nintendo and Sega consoles, so I feel particularly well placed to pass judgment on these two. In addition to that, Super Mario Bros. Is actually the first film I remember seeing at the cinema as a kid, at the Tatton Cinema in Gatley, Stockport. I seem to remember getting into an argument with my younger brother because he couldn't pronounce Luigi properly, although to be fair, he was only 4 at the time. Sonic was obviously released much more recently, having the misfortune to hit cinemas just at the time when the world was starting to lock down, which will have naturally hit its box office takings. But how will the two compare? Is Mario as bad as people said it was at the time? Will Sonic still seem relevant nearly 30 years later? Well, let's find out. Although if you're the sort of person who didn't find the cheat codes, you may find there are too many spoilers for your liking, so it might be best to complete the films before continuing. First up, it's Super Mario Bros. And here are the facts.
Year of release.
1993.
Directed by
Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton.
Starring
Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, Dennis Hopper and Samantha Mathis.
Running time.
1 hour and 44 minutes.
Current Rotten Tomatoes rating.
24%.
Budget.
$48 million.
Worldwide box office takings.
$38.9 million.
Where to watch.
It's on Amazon Prime. In this big screen adaptation of the classic Nintendo game, Mario and Luigi are two Brooklyn-based plumbers who, whilst trying to aid a damsel in distress, inadvertently get pulled through to an alternate dimension where people have evolved from dinosaurs instead of apes. The Super Mario brothers must overcome a totalitarian government and stop the evil Koopa before he can merge the two dimensions together and rule the world. Or something like that. So obviously Mario was huge in the late 80s and early 90s, and it's obvious why they'd be keen to cash in on it. But it felt like they also had one eye on films of the time and tried to make this far more adult than the games ever were. Look, I love Mario games even now, but they're clearly aimed at pre-teens, and the filmmakers seem to have forgotten that. The film starts with the Mario theme and some 8-bit graphics to remind you of the game, but then quickly leaves that behind. It felt like they wanted to make one type of film and then they've just thrown in some Mario references to try and squeeze some extra cash out of it. The dystopian futurescape look and feel reminded me a lot of Demolition Man, which was released in the same year, and also Brazil, which is ironic given Bob Hoskins also played a plumber in that film too. The references to the game are fleeting and often feel crowbarred in. The little bombs, the Goombas, which I'm sorry are supposed to have big heads and tiny bodies, not the other way around. Toad being an annoying busker, the mushrooms, etc, etc. There's also an awful lot of plumbing in this. The fact that he's a plumber in the games is actually quite incidental, but they've really gone to town in this one, with quite a few of the key plot points revolving around pipes and heating systems, although they do at one point go through some pipes to travel around, so at least that's consistent with the game. There's a surprising amount of skimpy outfits and skin on show in this film, mainly women, although this was the 90s, so maybe I shouldn't be that surprised. Now, I like a good-looking guy or girl as much as anyone else, but in a film that is supposed to be aimed at children, it felt really out of place. The CGI in this film is utter garbage. Thankfully, most of the effects seem to be done physically, and the creatures are puppets rather than digitally rendered, but the few moments they do resort to CGI, it's truly woeful. So you can see why they avoided it. And some of the sciencey mumbo-jumbo in this is a bit ridiculous. My favourite example of this was the de-evolving machine, which can actually be set to evolve people forward, and two idiot henchmen suddenly become super intelligent, a fact that is shown by them talking like the landed gentry and quoting square roots at each other. However, in saying all that, there was actually a sort of charm about this film that I really wasn't expecting. Despite the dark setting and creepy characters, there's also a lot of knockabout slapstick comedy, which made me laugh, although maybe that's because it was so incongruous, I'm not sure. I felt like that while the script was eye-openingly bad at times, it was done with its tongue firmly in its cheek and was actually just having fun with us. After all, it's supposed to be a fun family film, right? There's quite a few visual gags in this, which suggests a level of care taken by the filmmakers, which might not be immediately obvious. For example, a newspaper headline reading, "Missing Mrs. Still a Mystery." I like that it had these little extras like that. The music signposts when we're supposed to be laughing along with the film, even if the dark aesthetic and characters are trying to tell us otherwise. I was interested to see that this was one of Alan Silvestri's first jobs, who among other things did the music for the Avengers series of films. It's a bit like when I found out that Hans Zimmer was in the Buggles, the band that wrote Video Killed the Radio Star. Well, you've got to start somewhere, I suppose. The performances were suitably over the top and camp, and there were some pretty big names in this. Although I suppose even big actors need to take the paycheck occasionally, so I don't blame them really. Bob Hoskins is Mario, and actually doesn't do a bad job at appearing to take it all seriously whilst also knowing that it's ultimately quite ridiculous and having fun with it. Dennis Hopper is having a grand old time playing the pantomime villain Cooper, coming across as really creepy at times, especially with his cleanliness obsession and his weird lizard tongue. Ugh. John Leguizamo is Luigi, Mario's adoptive brother. He looks to be the film's connection to Diouf, making references to video games and watching TV all the time, and he plays the naive love-struck plumber believably, although his acting comes across as a little wooden at times. Samantha Mathis plays Daisy, who holds the key to the two worlds. She came across as nicely feisty, and her relationship with Luigi was sweet, although she was similar to Leguizamo in terms of acting skill. And the supporting cast were okay, despite their dodgy New York accents, although I get the impression that the direction for them was always more is more rather than less is more. Special shout out goes to the scheming sidekick Lena, played by Fiona Shaw, who I'm sorry I can only ever see as Mrs. Dursley, so it came as a bit of a shock to see her being totally badass in this. All in all, this film had a lot of issues, but I actually enjoyed it more than I was expecting to, and it certainly feels like the film didn't ever take itself too seriously. You can pick a lot of holes in it, like I have done here, but really it's best to just sit back and let it wash over you. My official rating is
Demolition Mario.
Next up, it's Sonic the Hedgehog, and here are the facts.
Year of release.
2020.
Directed by.
Jeff Fowler.
Starring.
Ben Schwartz, James Marsden, and Jim Carrey.
Running time.
1 hour, 39 minutes.
Current Rotten Tomatoes rating.
63%.
Budget.
$85 million.
Worldwide box office takings.
$319.7 million.
Where to watch.
It's on Now TV or can be rented elsewhere. Sonic the Hedgehog sees the titular blue alien forced out of his homeland and exiled to Earth, where he lives in secret among the folk of Green Hills, a sleepy backwater in Middle America. However, Sonic accidentally creates a power surge, leading the sinister government agent Dr. Robotnik to become hell-bent on hunting him down. Can Sonic and his new friend Tom evade capture and save the day? Despite my usual reluctance to talk about things outside of the film itself, it's hard to talk about this film without referencing the controversy surrounding the animation of Sonic. When it was first scheduled for release in 2019, the pictures of Sonic that Paramount released got widely panned and ridiculed. The animators had tried to make him more human-looking, but fans said this looked creepy and wanted something close to the original look from the games. And to be fair to Paramount, they actually listened. Fearing a backlash like that seen for the recent live-action CGI mesh-up Cats, they delayed the film by 6 months and got back to work. And I'm incredibly glad they did. Not only does Sonic look much better, It also means we can just concentrate on the film itself, rather than being distracted by this side issue that would have definitely been blown out of all proportions on social media. The film starts with a backstory on his home planet, which is a nice way to tie in the landscapes that would be more familiar to the game fans before then coming down to Earth. And the scenes of Sonic trying out Earth life and being a voyeur in the little town are quite well observed and quite poignant. I particularly like the scene where he is watching Speed through the window, wishing he was inside watching it with them. And I also note the Dennis Hopper connection to Super Mario Bros. 2, which was particularly cool for this episode of the podcast. And the event that kicked off all the aggravation was quite well observed too, with Sonic playing all the parts in a softball game, but really just wanting friends, and in his sorrow runs so hard that he accidentally brings the whole power grid down. There were some great set pieces in this film. I particularly enjoyed when Tom and Sonic stop off at a biker bar, which seems to be completely populated with people hired from Rent-A-Wrong'un, and it inevitably kicks off. The action goes in super slow motion, except for Sonic, who stays normal speed and runs riot, meaning when time speeds up again, all the baddies have been suitably and hilariously vanquished. The CGI and effects in this film are pretty good, and you quickly forget that Sonic isn't really there in person, although there was one bit when they wrapped him up in a towel, and it's clear that it's a mop handle and a basketball in there. Other than that, it was good. The script is a little mawkish at times, especially Sonic being on the outside looking in and Tom's dilemma of whether to leave Green Hills or not, but thankfully the performances are believable enough that the film gets away with this. There were also a lot of pop culture references in this, for example Sonic doing the floss on more than one occasion, and comments such as, "What year is it? Is The Rock president yet?" and so on. Whilst they didn't feel too out of place, I can't imagine these ageing very well, which is a shame as I think the rest of the film will. The performances are good. Ben Schwartz voices Sonic and manages to capture that effervescent energy and wisecracking while just about managing to stay on the right side of annoying, and had a believable relationship with Tom despite only being a voice. James Marsden plays Tom, the sleepy backwater cop who dreams of bigger things and manages to capture the ambition without making him arrogant, and he comes across as a really caring and lovable character. Dr. Robotnik is played by Jim Carrey and, well, what can you say about this? I can just imagine the call between Carrey and his agent. "Hey Jim, I've got a new role for you." "Ah, great. Is it dark and brooding and require me to underplay it and be really subtle?" No. They basically want you to be Jim Carrey, but times 1000. Okay. Yeah, I think I can work with that. Carrey is never knowingly underplayed as the film's antagonist, and I've got to say I blooming loved it. I feel this was Carrey back to his wacky best of the early 90s. And I'm aware that will be a massive turn-off for some people. Although my partner is not a Jim Carrey fan, and she still found it tolerable, so he should cope fine. He's clearly having a lot of fun in this role, and it was great to see. The supporting cast are a little forgettable, although to be fair, the film doesn't spend that much time with them, so they don't have many opportunities to shine. The sycophantic henchman, Agent Stone, played by Lee Majdoub, provided some good comedic moments, and Tika Sumpter provided compassion and heart as Tom's wife Maddie. In summary, I really enjoyed this film. The script was equal parts funny and heartwarming, and it was supported by some good performances. And even if you're not a fan of the games, there should still be something in this for you. My official rating is
Supersonic.
And now it's time for
Biggest Meanie of the Week.
This is a really close one, with both Koopa and Dr. Robotnik coming across as larger-than-life pantomime villains. But I think I've got to give it to King Koopa, given he wanted to take over the whole world rather than just destroy one small alien. Plus he was really creepy too. So Koopa is the biggest meanie for this week. Now it's time for your favourite part of the show.
Top trumps, top trumps, top trumps, top trumps, top trumps.
Who's going to win it this week? Let's find out. Our first category is
Mushrooms.
the alternate dimension in Mario is technically the Mushroom Kingdom, and in Sonic the Mushroom Land is the bad place where baddies get banished to. Mario has lots of mushrooms and fungus all over the place, so I think I have to give the win to Mario here. Second category,
References to the original game.
this is pretty close, with both having lots of references to keep the die-hard fans happy. They felt a little more forced in Mario, so I think I'll give the win to Sonic in this one. Round 3,
Bozos.
Sonic has a few quite useless henchmen, a pathetic police officer and some silly bad uns in the bar, but Mario has to win it with the 2 henchmen and a whole army of Goombas. Fourth round,
Getting their signature look.
Mario and Luigi have to put on some old overalls at one point, which just so happened to be red and blue for Mario and green and blue for Luigi, which was a little laughable. Sonic gets given his trademark red shoes by Tom's niece in quite a cute scene, and we also have Dr. Robotnik completing his transformation with the red suit, moustache and bald head. So the win has to go to Sonic for this round. 5.
Super gadgetry and wizardry.
I return to an old category here. There was lots of future-age tech in Mario which had a distinctive 90s feel to it, but Dr. Robotnik in Sonic had all the gadgets and they were pretty cool too. So the win goes to Sonic here.
And the winner is...
With a score of 3 rounds to 2, Sonic just edges it. So now for the final summary. Despite the games being locked in a heated battle in the early 90s, these films were released nearly 30 years apart, with Mario taking the option to cash in while they were hot and Sonic choosing to wait. Maybe Sonic saw the critical response to Mario, which was widely regarded as a flop, and thought it might be best to shelve it. It seems strange to be seeing a Sonic film so long after its heyday, but actually I think it was quite a clever move, even if it wasn't intentional. The kids who grew up with Sonic were always likely to watch it for nostalgia purposes. I include myself in that. But that generation are also now the parents who will take their kids along, both as it's a family film, but also to sharing what mum or dad were into when they were young. So in one fell swoop, Sonic appeals to both the parents and kids, without even really having to force it, with the exception of the modern references for the kids maybe. This is probably the most significant difference to Super Mario Bros. Because they didn't have that history with the parents, they had to try and force the film to cater to 2 completely different audiences, with the Demolition Man style set design and action for the parents, and the silly jokes and slapstick for the kids, leading it to not really satisfy either party. Sonic being delayed also had the added benefits of better CGI capabilities. The slow-mo scenes are really cool, and you really feel the G-forces when Sonic is running at the speed of sound around the place, whereas in Mario, they have not aged well. I feel like it would have been better to just have no CGI at all and have all the effects being physical, but I guess at the time the graphics would have felt quite cutting edge, so it's easy to say that in hindsight. Both films had great villains, although Carey was having way much more fun in this role than Hopper appeared to be. Dr. Robotnik was much closer to the original than Cooper was, although I guess it might have been quite hard to have him walking around as a big dinosaur turtle thing, like the original games. All in all, I actually found things to enjoy in both films, but Mario has some serious issues, which Sonic neatly manages to avoid. Mario was having an identity crisis throughout the whole running time, whereas Sonic felt much more comfortable in its own skin, and much more consistent throughout. Whilst I feel I should stick up for Super Mario Bros., Sonic just holds together better, and I can imagine it'll stand up in another 30 years' time. So Sonic takes the win this week. Well, it does take ages to beat Sega, of course.
I hope that someone gets my. I hope that someone gets my. I hope that someone gets my message to the podcast.
Thanks for all your messages so far. It's been great to hear what you think and talk to you all about the podcasts and films in general. The guys over at the Kids What We're Watching Tonight podcast tweeted the following after listening to last week's Role Reversals episode. Not watched Best Friend's Wedding in an actual decade. Love the restaurant sing-along. Glad McDreamy got knocked out. These guys are speaking my language. Definitely check out their podcast if you haven't already. A dad and his daughters watch films together, and it's really interesting to hear how different generations react to the same things. Find a link to their pod in the podcast description for this episode. Grace got in touch to suggest to do an episode on Tim Burton, picking the best and worst of his films, which sounds like a great plan. For a director with such a long career, with a whole range of films, but all with a distinctive style, I think he'd make a great subject for a future episode. If you have any other ideas, then let me know. And I'd love to give a shout out to Simon Ossamer from the Who I Became vodcast, who has been really lovely and supportive this week, so thank you, Simon. You can find his uplifting and inspiring conversations on his YouTube channel, with new ones released weekly. Search his name on YouTube and I'll put a link in the podcast notes too. If you have any burning questions, any theme ideas, or you just want a bit of a natter, then feel free to get in touch with me via email on somethingaboutsandifilmpod@gmail.com, and it's sasfilmpod on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. So that's it for another episode. What do you reckon? Do you agree? Were you a Sega or a Nintendo person? What console was your favourite? Mine was a Mega Drive. Do you even know what I'm talking about? As always, it'd be great if you could leave a review and pass on the podcast to anyone who you think might like it. So, thanks for listening, and a special thanks goes to Joe Baker for all the music, and Alison Moore for the voiceover work. See you next time on the Something About Sandy Film Fight podcast.